The school that Beth goes to is selling tickets to the annual dance competition. There were a total of 260 tickets sold. The school charges $7 for an adult ticket and $4 for a student ticket. If they made $1,565 at the competition, how many of each ticket were sold? Okay, we've read the problem. Now we're going to underline the question. What are they asking us to find out? Right. How many of each ticket were sold? Well, what kind of tickets are there? Right. There is an adult ticket, and we're trying to figure out how many of those were sold. And there is a student ticket, and we're trying to figure out how many of those were sold. Now, since those are our unknowns, we're going to use the variables A and S for adult and student tickets. Now, there were 260 tickets sold. So one of your equations equals 260 for the total amount of tickets sold. Now, isn't that from the adult tickets and the student tickets together? Do we know how many of those 260 were adult and how many were student? No. So for that reason, you're not writing a number beside those two variables because we don't know. We just know that the adult tickets and the student tickets totaled up to 260 tickets. Now, in the next sentence, it says the school charges $7 for each adult ticket, so 7 for each adult ticket, and $4 for each student ticket, and when they charge that money, they make this much money. So the first equation is all about the total number of tickets. The second equation is about the total money. That's why you attach the prices to the variables. So does everybody understand how I created those equations? Okay, now I want to solve this, and we're going to use the method of elimination because we don't want to try to graph it. First of all, we didn't even use X and Y, and we don't have any graph paper, and they're not in slope-intercept form. So instead of graphing, we're going to eliminate. Wouldn't it be nice if this were a -7 or this were a -4? Yes. Well, what do you want it to be? -4. Okay, so if you want this to be a -4, what do? You multiply that. You're going to make the S have a -4, but it would have been just as well had you put a -7 by the A. It doesn't matter. So to do that, you multiply this whole thing by -4. Now remember, you're multiplying the whole thing. You're multiplying the A by -4, the S by -4, and the 260 by -4. So that'll become -4A minus 4S equals negative what? 1,040? Shh, we don't need all that. Okay, so negative 1,040 is what you said? Okay, now we don't need to multiply the bottom equation by anything because it's already got that +4 that's going to cancel out with the -4 we created. So it stays the same. Now that we have a variable that's ready to be eliminated, and when I say ready, I mean it has the same number but opposite signs, you simply add the two equations together. So what is -4A plus 7A? 3A. What is -4S plus 4S? 0S, right? So it eliminates. You don't have to write 0S. And then what is -1,040 plus 1,565? Okay. Now that you have 3A equals 525, how do you solve for A? Divide by 3, and that lets you know that A equals 175. Okay, so if A equals 175, how can you easily figure out what S should equal? Well, subtract it from 260, right? Because if A equals 175, 175 plus what is 260? 85. They're easy to figure out when you have an equation like that with no coefficients beside the numbers. You have a typo in your calculator. Okay, now number 2 is the exact same kind of problem as number 1, so I'm going to give you about 2 minutes to try it by yourself, and then I'm just going to give the answers. I'm not going to go over it. So try number 2 by yourself. The school that Beth goes to is selling tickets to the annual talent show. On the first day of ticket sales, they made $585, so that was one of my totals. There were 85 tickets sold, so that was my other total. We don't know how many of each were sold, so you just put A plus S. But we do know as far as the money's concerned that $9 for each adult, $5 for each student. I then chose to multiply the top by -9 to get that to be a -9A that would cancel out with the 9A below it. And then after doing all the work, I ended up with S equals 45. Well, if there were 45 students, there had to be 40 adults because there were a total of 85 tickets. Okay, did you get it right? All right, let's look at number 3. Perry and Jenny each improved their yards by planting daylilies and ivy. They bought their supplies from the same store. Perry spent $123 on 7 daylilies and 10 pots of ivy. Jenny spent $120 on 10 daylilies and 5 pots of ivy. What is the cost of 1 daylily and the cost of 1 pot of ivy? So they're wanting to know the cost of 1 daylily and the cost of 1 pot of ivy. So our unknowns are the cost of a daylily and the cost of a pot of ivy. So for that reason, I'll be using the variables D and I. Now, the 2 equations are going to come from the 2 different people, Perry and Jenny. Perry's scenario is that he spent $123, so that's his total, and that was from purchasing 7 daylilies and 10 pots of ivy. Okay, he purchased 7 daylilies and 10 pots of ivy, and his total was $123. Jenny spent $120, so her total was $120, and she spent it on 10 daylilies, so 10D, and 5 pots of ivy, so 5I. Now we need to solve this by elimination because we definitely don't want to try to graph it. I can't multiply the top by anything because you can't turn a 7 into a 10 or a 10 into a 5. I'm going to multiply the, well, but it's easier to do this. I'm going to multiply the bottom by what? -2. Because if I multiply by -2, won't it make this a -10? And then that would cancel out with the positive 10 above it when we add them. Okay, so the top equation will remain what it is. And then the bottom equation all gets multiplied by -2, making that -20D minus 10I minus -240. Okay, now that you have the i's ready to eliminate because they have the same number but opposite signs, you add the equations together. 7D plus -20D is -13D. 10I plus -10I cancels because it's 0I. And then 123 plus a -240 is -117. Now what do we do? Divide by -13. And so D equals 9. Okay, if we know that the daylilies are $9, how do I now figure out what a pot of ivy costs? Plug it into either of the original equations, right? Which one do you want to plug into? Okay, so if we have 7D, but we now know that D equals 9, what will that become? 63. Because 7 times 9 is 63, then plus 10I equals 123. Now to solve for that I, what do we do? Right? Because you're trying to get everything away from I. And you end up with 10I equals, and now what do we do? Divide by 10 and you get I equals 6. So the cost of a pot of ivy is 6. Number 4 is just like number 3. I'm going to give you 2 minutes to try it by yourself. Okay, so that's what you should have got for number 4. I equals 10, D equals 12. Number 5. Rob's school is selling tickets to a fall musical. On the first day of ticket sales, the school sold 18 adult tickets for a total of $54. The school took in $171 on the second day by selling 2 adult tickets and 11 student tickets. What is the price of 1 adult ticket and 1 student ticket? Okay, that's what they're wanting us to figure out. So for that reason, our unknowns are the price of an adult ticket, so we'll call that A, and the price of a student ticket, so we'll call that S. Now, on the, what, Aaron? On the first day, the school sold 18 adult tickets, so 18A. Did they sell any student tickets? So you could write plus 0S, but you don't really need to write that because it's 0. Just write equals 54. Then on the second day, the school took in $171, and that was from 2 adult tickets and 11 student tickets. Now, because of the top equation missing the S, you're not going to be able to use elimination. This one's actually much easier. You can simply take that equation to the side and isolate the A by doing what? Divide by 18. And so A equals 3. Now, just like any time you've solved for one letter, how do you solve for the other? So you would replace the A in the bottom one with a 3, which would make this a 6, just a 6, because you're replacing the A with a 3. And now you just solve for S by subtracting the 6 to the other side, and then that equals 165. And now what do you do? Divide by 11, and so S equals 15. Okay, number 6 is the exact same type of problem, so try it. Everybody understand how to do it? You should have got C equals 9, S equals 8. Okay. It's Seth. In order to solve the systems below by elimination, which equation do you need to multiply by a number? What number can you multiply it by? Which variable will be eliminated? So in question 7, which equation do you need to multiply, the top or bottom? The bottom. By what number? -3. Because doing so will make this -3y and will eliminate the y's when you add them together, right? That's all they're wanting you to do for this problem. You don't actually have to solve it. There's one like that on the test. Okay, number 8. Which equation has to be multiplied, top or bottom? Top this time by what number? Right, because in doing so, you will make a what beside this y? That will cancel out with the positive 15 below it, eliminating the y. Okay, quickly try 9 and 10. No, it just depends on the equations. And number 9, this time you would have to multiply the bottom equation by a -2 so that would become a -6 and then eliminate the x's. In this equation, the only choice is to multiply the top by a +3, which would make a 6x, eliminating with the -6x below it. Okay, next page. On this page, we're actually going to have to solve by elimination. So let me get some scrap paper. Okay, number 11. When you look at these two equations, what do you need to multiply by? On the top. Because when you do so, it'll make a 9x minus 24y equals -12. The bottom equation remains the same. Okay, then now that the x's are ready to eliminate because they have the same number but with opposite signs, you add the equations together, causing the x's to cancel out because they become 0x, the y's to become -17y, and the constants to combine to be -34. Now to get y by itself, what do? Divide by -17, and so y equals 2. Where do you place the y value in an ordered pair? On the right. So that lets me know A and C are out because they both have a -2 in that location. Now how do you figure out if 4 or 8 is the correct x value? You plug in 2 for one of the y's. Which y do you want to plug it into? Okay, if you plug into the bottom, it'll be -9x plus what? 14, because 7 times 2 is 14. Now to solve for x, what do? Subtract 14, and then negative 9x equals negative 36. You then divide by negative 9 to give you positive 4, which is B. Okay, let's skip down to number 13. Can I erase the other? We're skipping to 13. Okay, which equation do I need to multiply by and what number? The top by a negative 2. And you're doing that to make a negative 8 sit by this x so that it will eliminate with the 8 below it. So negative 8x minus 20y equals negative 24. Then the bottom stays 8x minus 5y equals negative 26. Now we add the two equations together. Negative 8x plus 8x is 0x, so it eliminates. Negative 20y plus negative 5y is negative 25y. And negative 24 plus negative 26 is negative 50. Now divide by negative 25, giving you a y value of 2. Remember, the y goes in the second place of the ordered pair, so that eliminates B and C. Now to find the x value, you just choose one of the equations. I'll just go with the top, 4x plus, but instead of writing 10y, that will become a 20. Now to solve for x, what do? Right? And you get 4x equals negative 8, and then when you divide by 4 on both sides, x equals negative 2, so D. Well, they're 5.5 each, except for their free response are 6 each. There's 2 free response on this test, and there's 16 multiple choice. Today you're only taking 7 though, and of your 7, 2 are free response, 5 are multiple choice. Just take the test. Okay, we don't need to talk about that. All right, now I'm going to teach you a second method for those of you who struggle with elimination. Okay, so watch. This is for those of you who struggle with elimination. You're going to rewrite the equations, but you're going to leave blanks for the x and the y locations. I'm just teaching for people who don't know how to do elimination. Now, doesn't A say that the x value is 1, the y value is 0? So I'm going to replace the x's with 1s and the y's with 0s. What's negative 7 times 1? What's 20 times 0? So is negative 7 plus 0 20? So that lets me know A is not the right answer. So then you would just go to your next choice, which is B, and it says that the x value that's correct is 0 and the y value that is correct is 1. What's negative 7 times 0? 0. What's 20 times 1? Isn't 0 plus 20, 20? Okay, negative 9 times 0 is 0. 10 times 1 is 10. 0 plus 10 is 10. So that's the right answer because that's the one that when plugged in both equations worked. Okay, number 14, you would do the same way. Negative 7x plus 4y equals 12. 4x plus 2y equals negative 24. Now to save time, I'm not going to sit here and plug them all in. I'm just going to plug in the correct one, which is D. Negative 4, it would go in both x's, and negative 4 would go in both y's. That becomes a positive 28. That becomes a negative 16, and 28 minus 16 is 12. This becomes a negative 16. This becomes a negative 8. When added together, that makes a negative 24. What if you plugged all 3 of those in and you couldn't get any of them to make these two numbers? You would have circled B. But I would at least try them twice before you just circle that. Okay? All right, number 15. Solve each system by graphing. Is this equation ready to graph? No. So you need to take it to the side wherever you have room and get it in y equals mx plus b form. So what would that require first? Divide by negative 3. And so y equals, simplify, what is 3 over negative 3? So negative 1x, what is 9 over negative 3? Negative 3. Now that it's in slope-intercept form, you can identify the slope and the y-intercept. What is the slope? Right, and what is the y-intercept? To put that on the graph, what do you do first? You plot your point at negative 3, and then from there you go, the top number is up or down, and since it's negative, it's down. The bottom number is left and right, positive is right. So down one, right one. And think about it. If you have a line with a negative slope, shouldn't your line be going down? Now, if we wanted some points over here, we could also have gone up one, left one. Once you have as many points as you can fit, you just connect them with a line. And now you move on to the second equation of the system. Is it ready to be graphed? No. So you have to take the time to rewrite it in slope-intercept form. And so what would be your first step in that process? Subtract the x to the other side because it's your mx and it belongs on the right side of the equal sign. Now we have negative y equals 1 minus x, or couldn't I go and reverse that and put the negative x and then the positive 1? Now is it ready to graph? Why not? Y is not quite by itself. There's a negative 1 being multiplied by it, so to undo that, you divide. So that becomes y equals negative 1 over negative 1 is positive 1x. Positive 1 over negative 1 is negative 1. That gives you a slope of and a y-intercept of. Okay, so you first plot your y-intercept to negative 1, and then from there you go up 1, right 1, up 1, right 1. But as you see, if you continue going up and right, you're not intersecting the line. So you need to instead go down 1, left 1, and you intersect the line at what location? Negative 1 on the x-axis and negative 2 on the y-axis. Make sure you write your x value first, your y value second. Okay, number 16. Is the first equation ready to be graphed? No. So you take it to wherever you have room and you rearrange it into slope-intercept form. So what do we need to do first to get y by itself? Add the x to the other side. You now have negative 2 plus x, or couldn't you go ahead and write positive x minus 2 equals y? Now technically that's ready to graph because it's y equals mx plus b form. But if you want it to look better, couldn't you just reverse it by flipping the sides? And what property says we can just flip-flop the sides? Symmetric. Now what is the slope of that line? 1 over 1, because that's an understood positive 1 there. And what is the y-intercept? Negative 2. So you put your first point at negative 2, and then from there you go up 1, right 1, up 1, right 1, up 1, right 1, up 1, right 1. Or instead of going up and right, you can go down and left. Okay, and remember the reason your line is going up from left to right is because your slope was a positive 1. Connect them and then move on to your second equation. Is it ready to graph? No. So you have to take the time to rewrite it into slope-intercept form. So what would we do first? Right, that's your mx, and move it over there to where mx belongs. Now we have 4y equals what? Correct, go ahead and reverse them. That's commutative property. And now what do we do? And so y equals negative 1 over 4, because that's an understood 1 right there, and then plus 3. So what is the slope of that line? And what is the y-intercept? 3. So you put your y-intercept of 3 on the y-axis, and then from there you go. And the first time you do, don't you hit the other line? And where do you hit it? 4, 2. That's the intersection.